The last rays of sunlight cast long shadows across Willow Creek's main street as Judge Harmon's gavel struck the wooden bench with finality. The small Colorado mining town's courthouse fell silent, save for the soft gasp that escaped Eleanor Montgomery's lips. At 26, the widow stood straight-backed in her black dress, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened, as the judge's declaration echoed through the packed room. The court finds that Mrs. Montgomery, in Stark, showed up. Eleanor Montgomery requires male guardianship to maintain her late husband's property and business interests. Given the deceased's outstanding debts to Mr. William Blackwood, the court approves Mr. Blackwood's petition for marriage. Eleanor's emerald eyes flashed with defiance, but Judge Harmon continued, "The wedding will take place in 2 weeks' time." Court adjourned. The townspeople erupted in murmurs as Eleanor swept from the room, her chin held high despite the crushing weight that had just been placed upon her shoulders. Hey friends, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. I'd love to know what city you're watching from. Now, back to our tale. Outside, the late September air carried the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains. Eleanor's boots kicked up dust as she strode purposefully toward her her mercantile store. 3 years of marriage to Thomas Montgomery had ended abruptly with a mining accident 6 months ago, leaving her with a business she'd helped build and debts she hadn't known existed. William Blackwood, the town's wealthiest businessman and owner of the largest silver mine in the territory, had apparently been Thomas's creditor. Now, at 50 years old, with a reputation for ruthlessness in business and cruelty to his workers, Blackwood would become her husband. The thought made bile rise in Eleanor's throat as she pushed through the mercantile's door, the bell jingling cheerfully in stark contrast to her mood. Martha Wells, Eleanor's friend and shop assistant, looked up from arranging a display of canned goods. "How did it go?" she asked, though the answer was written plainly across Eleanor's face. Eleanor sank into the chair behind the counter, her carefully maintained composure finally crumbling. The judge granted Blackwood's petition. "I'm to marry him in 2 weeks," she said, voice trembling with both fury and despair. Martha set down a tin of peaches and moved to her friend's side, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Oh, Ellie, there must be something we can do. You've run this place better than Thomas ever did. Everyone knows that." Eleanor nodded, brushing away a tear that had escaped despite her best efforts. "The law doesn't care what everyone knows, Martha. To them, I'm just a woman who can't possibly manage without a husband." The store's bell jingled again, and both women looked up. Eleanor hastily composed herself, expecting a customer, but instead found Sheriff James Doyle removing his hat as he entered. The lawman's weathered face was etched with concern as he approached the counter. "Mrs. Montgomery, I just heard the judge's ruling. I wanted to see if you were all right." Eleanor appreciated the sheriff's kindness. He'd been a fair man during his 5 years in Willow Creek, and one of the few who'd treated her as more than just Thomas's wife. "I'm as well as can be expected, Sheriff, though I confess I didn't expect the court to sell me off like livestock at auction." The sheriff winced at her bluntness, but didn't contradict her. "Blackwood has too much influence in this town. He's got the judge, the mayor, and half the town council in his pocket. But that doesn't make this right." As darkness fell across Willow Creek, Eleanor locked up the mercantile and began the short walk to her modest home at the edge of town. The weight of the court's decision pressed down on her with each step. 2 weeks, 14 days of freedom before becoming Mrs. William Blackwood. The thought made her stomach turn. She'd married Thomas out of genuine affection, if not passionate love, and he'd been a decent husband despite his secret financial dealings. Blackwood, however, was a man known for breaking the spirits of those who oppose him. Eleanor had no illusions about what marriage to such a man would mean. The independence she'd carved out for herself, especially in the months since Thomas's death, would be crushed beneath Blackwood's boot heel. Lost in these dark thoughts, she almost didn't. In the brief illumination, Eleanor caught a glimpse of the stranger, tall and broad-shouldered, with several days' worth of stubble on his jaw and eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. The match lit a cigarette, and the ember glowed red as the man took a drag. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice low and graveled. His tone wasn't threatening, but Eleanor's hand moved to the small derringer she'd taken to carrying in her pocket since Thomas's death. "Who are you? And what are you doing on my property?" she demanded, proud that her voice betrayed none of the fear fluttering in her chest. The stranger took another drag of his cigarette before answering. "Name's Cole Reeves. Just passing through town, looking for work. Heard the mercantile might be hiring." Eleanor studied him warily, taking in his trail-worn clothes and the holstered Colt at his hip. "The mercantile isn't hiring, Mr. Reeves, and even if it were, we don't conduct business after dark on private property." Cole Reeves straightened from his lounging position against the fence post, and Eleanor tensed, her fingers wrapping more firmly around the derringer. But the stranger merely flicked his cigarette into the dirt and ground it out with the heel of his boot. "Fair enough, ma'am, though I also heard you might be in need of more than just a shop clerk. News travels fast in a small town." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Had he somehow heard about the court's decision already? "Whatever you've heard, Mr. Reeves, I doubt you can help with my situation. Good evening." She moved to walk past him toward her house, but his next words stopped her. "I've dealt with men like Blackwood before. Men who think money and power give them the right to take whatever or whoever they want." Eleanor turned slowly to face him, reassessing this dangerous-looking stranger in the moonlight. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" The next morning, Eleanor opened the mercantile at the usual time, trying to maintain an air of normalcy despite the sleepless night she'd endured. After her conversation with Cole Reeves, she tossed and turned, his proposition turning over and over in her mind, like a tumbler in a lock. It was madness to even consider it, and yet, the bell above the door jingled, and Eleanor looked up to find William Blackwood himself entering her store. Dressed in an expensive suit that did little to disguise his corpulent frame, Blackwood removed his hat and offered what he clearly believed to be a charming smile. "Good morning, my dear Eleanor. I thought I might pay a visit to my future wife and discuss some changes I'd like to make to our establishment." The possessive emphasis made Eleanor's skin crawl, but she forced herself to remain civil. "Mr. Blackwood, this is still my establishment for the next 2 weeks, and I'm quite busy with inventory this morning," Eleanor replied, gesturing to the ledger open before her. Blackwood's smile didn't falter, but a cold light entered his eyes as he placed his hands on the counter, leaning toward her. "Now, Eleanor, there's no need to be difficult. We both know this arrangement is for the best. A woman has no business running a store on her own, especially one with such financial complications." His gaze wandered meaningfully around the mercantile, taking in the well-stocked shelves and orderly displays that Eleanor had worked so hard to maintain. "I'm thinking we'll sell this place once we're married. It's beneath a man of my stature to be involved in such petty commerce. Perhaps we can convert it to a saloon. Something more profitable. Eleanor bit the inside of her cheek to keep from lashing out. She'd poured her heart and soul into this store, especially after Thomas died. The mercantile serves an important function in this community, Mr. Blackwood. Not everyone can afford to have goods shipped directly from Denver, as you do. Blackwood waved a dismissive hand. The community's needs are not my concern, my dear. Profit is. And speaking of profit, he reached across the counter, his fleshy fingers closing around Eleanor's wrist with surprising strength. I expect you to be a bit more welcoming when addressing your future husband. After all, I'm doing you quite the favor by taking on a widow with debts. Eleanor resisted the urge to pull away, knowing it would only amuse him to see her struggle. Instead, she met his gaze coldly. 2 weeks, Mr. Blackwood. You don't have any husbandly rights until then. After Blackwood finally left, promising to return soon to help her prepare for the wedding, Eleanor sagged against the counter, trembling with anger and revulsion. Martha, who had discreetly retreated to the storeroom during Blackwood's visit, emerged with concern etched on her kind face. That man is vile, Ellie. There has to be something we can do. Eleanor straightened, her resolve hardening. Perhaps there is, Martha. I had an interesting conversation last night. She lowered her voice, glancing toward the door to ensure no customers were entering. A stranger in town offered his assistance with my Blackwood problem. Martha's eyes widened. What kind of assistance? Ellie, you're not thinking of doing something dangerous, are you? Eleanor sighed, running her fingers along the edge of her ledger. What could be more dangerous than marrying William Blackwood? At least this way, I might have a chance at freedom. As the day progressed, Eleanor served her customers with her usual efficiency and courtesy, though her mind remained preoccupied with Cole Reeves's proposition. He'd suggested meeting tonight at the abandoned Miller cabin outside town to discuss details. It was reckless, potentially scandalous, and definitely dangerous to meet a strange man alone after dark, but Eleanor was running out of options and time. Just after noon, the bell rang again, and Eleanor looked up to see Sheriff Doyle entering, followed by a trail-worn man she recognized immediately as Cole Reeves. Her heart skipped a beat, fearing the worst. Had the sheriff somehow discovered their conversation last night? But Doyle's expression was merely professional as he approached the counter. Mrs. Montgomery, this fella's looking for work. Says he's handy with repairs and stock management. Thought you might be able to use some help around here, what with everything going on. Eleanor studied Cole Reeves in the daylight. He was older than she'd initially thought, perhaps in his mid-40s, with streaks of gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of a hard life, lived largely outdoors. A long scar ran from his left temple down his cheek, giving him a dangerous appearance, despite his current respectful demeanor as he stood hat in hand. "Mr. Reeds, is it?" she said, maintaining a formal tone. "What experience do you have with mercantile work?" Cole's eyes met hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement of their previous meeting passing between them. "Worked supply at Fort Laramie for 2 years, ma'am. Before that, I ran pack trains up to the mining camps. I know my way around inventory and can handle just about any repairs you might need." Sheriff Doyle nodded approvingly. "I checked his references at the telegraph office. Seems legitimate enough." Eleanor considered for a moment, aware that hiring this man would bring him into her daily life, a potential complication, but also an opportunity to determine if she could trust him with her more desperate plan. "Very well, Mr. Reeves. I could use some help reorganizing the storeroom and making deliveries. You can start today if you're available." Sheriff Doyle seemed pleased. "Good, good. Always better to have a man around for the heavy lifting, especially with all these new mining supplies coming in." Eleanor bit back a retort about having managed perfectly well on her own, reminding herself that the sheriff meant well. As Doyle left, tipping his hat in farewell, Cole Reeves remained standing before the counter. "Where would you like me to start, Mrs. Simi?" "Montgomery?" he asked, and Eleanor could have sworn there was the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of customers and tasks. Eleanor kept Cole busy with the storeroom inventory, watching surreptitiously as he worked efficiently and without complaint. He was clearly strong, moving heavy crates with ease that would have taken Eleanor significant effort. More importantly, he seemed intelligent, quickly grasping her inventory system and even suggesting some improvements that she had to admit were sensible. As closing time approached, Martha pulled Eleanor aside near the canned goods. "He seems capable enough," she whispered, "but are you sure it's wise to hire a stranger right now? What will Blackwood think?" Eleanor arranged jars of preserved peaches with more force than necessary. "I don't care what Blackwood thinks. Besides, he can hardly object to me hiring help for the store he intends to sell off anyway." As dusk fell, Eleanor closed the shop, painfully aware that Cole Reeves was watching her from where he swept the wooden floor. When Martha had gone, he approached, his voice low. "Our meeting still on for tonight?" Eleanor hesitated, suddenly overwhelmed by the audacity of what she was considering. "Mr. Reeves, He cut her off gently. "Cole, and before you decide, you should know I've had some run-ins with Blackwood before. This isn't just about money for me." Eleanor's curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Cole glanced toward the window, ensuring no one was passing by outside. "His mining operation in Silverton 2 years ago. Men died because he cut corners on support beams. My brother was one of them." Understanding dawned on Eleanor. "So, this is about revenge for you." It wasn't a question. Cole's expression hardened. "Justice, Mrs. Montgomery. Something the courts don't seem interested in providing either of us." The abandoned Miller cabin stood a mile outside of town, a decaying testament to someone's failed dream. Moonlight filtered through the missing roof shingles as Eleanor made her way inside, a lantern in one hand and her derringer in the other. Cole Reeves was already there, his tall figure silhouetted against the back wall. "You came," he said simply, striking a match to light his own lantern. The small flame illuminated his scarred face, casting shadows that emphasized the hardness in his eyes. "I'm still not convinced this isn't madness," Eleanor admitted, setting her lantern on what remained of the cabin's table. "But I can't marry that man. I won't." Cole nodded, understanding in his gaze. "Then we need a plan that gets you free of Blackwood without making you an outlaw. Running isn't an option. He'd just hunt you down, and you'd lose everything you've worked for." Eleanor paced the small cabin, the floorboards creaking beneath her boots. "What exactly are you suggesting, then? I can't challenge him to a duel." A ghost of a smile touched Cole's lips. "No, but I can." Eleanor stopped pacing, staring at him in shock. "That's your plan? To kill him?" "I didn't come here to arrange a murder, Mr. Reeves." Cole leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "Not murder. A fair fight. Blackwood's not above taking on challenges. Too proud for that. If I can provoke him into drawing on me?" Eleanor shook her head vehemently. "Absolutely not. Even if you survived, you'd hang for it, or spend your life running from the law. I won't have another death on my conscience." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Another?" Eleanor looked away. "Thomas's mining accident. He was only there that day because I'd asked him to check on our investment. If I just let him stay home. Cole's voice softened slightly. That wasn't your fault, Mrs. Montgomery, and neither would this be. He pushed away from the wall, stepping closer. But if you won't consider that option, there's another way. Blackwood wants you because of your property, and because you defied him by running the mercantile successfully when he said you'd fail. He's a proud man who can't stand being shown up, especially by a woman. Eleanor considered this. So what are you suggesting? Cole's eyes gleamed in the lantern light. We give him a different kind of competition, one that might make him decide you're more trouble than you're worth. Eleanor frowned, confused, until realization dawned. You're suggesting I court someone else in 2 weeks? That's hardly enough time to make Blackwood jealous. And besides, what man in town would dare cross him? Cole Reeves stepped closer, close enough that Eleanor could smell the leather of his coat and the faint scent of tobacco that clung to him. Not a man from town, but dangerous stranger with nothing to lose and a score to settle. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. You? Cole nodded once. A respectable widow, suddenly taken with a notorious gunslinger. It would scandalize the town and infuriate Blackwood. He'd have to decide whether he wants a wife who's publicly humiliated him before they've even wed. Eleanor tried to process this outlandish suggestion. And why would you do this? Revenge against Blackwood isn't enough reason to risk your life pretending to court me. Cole's expression remained unreadable in the shifting lantern light. Let's just say I owe a debt to a woman who once showed kindness to a stranger when the rest of the world had turned its back. This would make us even. The next morning, Willow Creek awoke to a fresh scandal. Eleanor Montgomery, widow and soon-to-be bride of William Blackwood, was seen riding into town alongside the new, mysterious hired hand from her mercantile. Worse still, they were laughing together like old friends, and he'd had the audacity to help her down from her horse, his hands lingering perhaps a moment too long at her waist. By noon, the gossip had reached the Silver Baron Saloon, Blackwood's favorite establishment and unofficial headquarters. The wealthy mine owner sat at his usual table, playing poker with Judge Harmon and 2 of the town councilmen, when a nervous barkeeper approached. "Mr. Blackwood, sir, thought you might want to know what they're saying about Mrs. Montgomery." Blackwood's expression darkened as the man whispered in his ear. The playing cards in his meaty hand crumpled as his fingers tightened. "Who is this man?" he demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. At the mercantile, business had never been better, though Eleanor suspected many of the day's customers were really there to observe the scandalous new dynamic between her and her employee. Cole played his part masterfully, standing perhaps a bit too close as he helped her reach items on high shelves, his smile a touch too warm when their hands brushed during transactions. Martha watched with wide eyes and increasing concern as the charade unfolded. During a quiet moment, when Cole was unloading supplies in the back, she pulled Eleanor aside. "Ellie, what are you doing?" she hissed. "If Blackwood hears about this, and he will, he'll be furious. He might hurt you, or worse, this Reeves fellow." Eleanor straightened a display of fabric with determined movements. "That's precisely the point, Martha. I'm creating options where there were none before." Just after 3 o'clock, the bell above the door jangled violently as William Blackwood stormed into the mercantile, his face flushed with anger. "Eleanor!" he bellowed, causing several customers to jump in alarm. "What is the meaning of this? The entire town is talking about you, and some drifter." Eleanor met his gaze calmly, though her heart hammered in her chest. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't appreciate your tone in my establishment. If you wish to speak with me, you can do so civilly or not at all." Blackwood's face purpled further as he stepped toward her, pointing a thick finger accusingly. "You are to be my wife in less than 2 weeks. Your behavior reflects on me. I will not be made a fool of by a woman who doesn't know her place." The store had gone silent, the customers watching the confrontation with horrified fascination. Eleanor stood her ground, chin raised defiantly. "Until the wedding, Mr. Blackwood, my place is exactly where I choose it to be." Before Blackwood could respond, Cole emerged from the storeroom, carrying a crate of ammunition that he set down with deliberate care. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Montgomery?" he asked. His voice mild, but his eyes hard as they locked with Blackwood's. The mine owner's gaze flickered to Cole's holstered Colt, then back to his face. Recognition dawning. "You," he spat. "I know you. You're Cole Reeves, that troublemaker from Silverton." Cole's expression remained neutral. "Good memory, Mr. Blackwood. Though some might say the real trouble in Silverton was the mine owner who let 6 men die to save a few dollars on support beams." A collective gasp went up from the onlookers. Blackwood's hand twitched toward his own pistol, but he seemed to think better of it in a room full of witnesses. Instead, he turned back to Eleanor. "So this is your game? Taking up with a known gunman to spite me?" Eleanor moved around the counter to stand beside Cole, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Mr. Reeves is an employee who has proven himself hardworking and respectful, more than I can say for my court-appointed fiancé." Blackwood's eyes narrowed to slits. "This isn't over, Eleanor. Your little performance changes nothing. The law has spoken, and in 2 weeks, you will be my wife, regardless of whatever distractions you indulge in beforehand." He spun on his heel and stormed out, nearly knocking over young Billy Jenkins, who was delivering mail. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring excitedly about the confrontation they'd just witnessed. Eleanor released a shaky breath, suddenly aware of how close she was standing to Cole. She took a step back, composing herself. "Well, that went about as expected." Cole nodded, his eyes still on the door. "He'll be back, and not just with words next time. Men like Blackwood don't take public humiliation lightly." Eleanor knew he was right. Their performance had bought them attention, but not salvation. "We need to accelerate the plan," she said quietly. "Court rumors won't be enough to dissuade him. If anything, they've just made him more determined to assert his ownership over me." Cole considered this, running a hand through his hair. "There's one thing that might work, but you're not gonna like it." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, waiting. "We need to elope before the court-mandated wedding. Once you're legally married to someone else, Blackwood's petition becomes moot." Eleanor stared at him, momentarily speechless. "Marry you? A man I've known for 2 days? That's your solution?" As darkness fell over Willow Creek, Eleanor closed the mercantile and retreated to her home, her mind reeling from the day's events and Cole's outrageous suggestion. Marriage, the very institution she was trying to escape, now proposed as her salvation. She sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of tea cooling untouched before her. A soft knock at the back door startled her. Hand moving to her derringer, she approached cautiously. "Who's there?" she called. "It's me," came Cole's low voice. Eleanor unlocked the door, allowing him to slip inside. He looked grim. Blackwood's hired guns arrived on the evening stage, 3 of them, staying at the hotel. Word is they're former soldiers turned mercenaries, men who did Blackwood's dirty work in Silverton and elsewhere. Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Does the sheriff know?" Cole's mouth twisted. "Doyle saw them arrive. Doesn't look like he plans to interfere. They haven't broken any laws yet." Eleanor sank into a chair, the reality of her situation hitting her anew. So Blackwood intends to eliminate you and force me to the altar anyway. Cole remained standing, his tall figure imposing in her small kitchen. That's his style. Remove obstacles permanently. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "My offer stands, Eleanor. A marriage of convenience to free you from Blackwood. Once he moves on, we can arrange an annulment if you wish." Eleanor looked up at him, studying his scarred face in the lamplight. There was hardness there, yes, but also something else. A steadiness, perhaps, or a kind of weary honor that spoke of a man who had seen the worst of humanity, but hadn't surrendered to it. "Why are you really doing this, Cole? Revenge for your brother can't be the only reason you're willing to risk your life for a woman you barely know." Cole pulled out the chair across from her and sat down heavily. For the first time, Eleanor could see the weariness behind his guarded exterior. "My brother was the last of my family. After he died, I spent 2 years tracking down everyone responsible, thinking justice would bring me peace." His calloused fingers traced a pattern on her worn tablecloth. "It didn't, just left me hollow. Then last winter, I was caught in a blizzard outside a small homestead in Nebraska. The woman there took me in, nursed me back to health, when she could have just let me die in the snow. She said something I can't forget. The world's got enough vengeance in it. What it needs is more mercy." He looked up, meeting Eleanor's gaze. "When I heard about your situation with Blackwood, I thought maybe this was my chance to be on the right side of something for once." Eleanor felt something shift inside her, a wall crumbling that she'd built after Thomas's death. "If we did this, and I'm not saying we should, what happens afterward? I have a life here, a business." Cole nodded, understanding her concerns. "That's entirely up to you. I meant what I said about an annulment. Or I could stay on as your employee, nothing more than that. Or I could ride out once Blackwood's gone, and you'd never see me again." He held her gaze steadily. "I'm not looking to trap you in another cage, Eleanor. Just trying to help you escape the one being built around you." Eleanor stood abruptly, moving to the window to look out at the darkened street. Willow Creek had been her home for 5 years. She'd built a life here, had friends, a purpose. The thought of leaving it all behind was painful, yet staying meant surrendering to Blackwood's ownership. "I need time to think," she finally said. Before dawn the next morning, Eleanor made her way to the small church on the outskirts of town. The sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the world in shades of gray as she knocked on the door of the adjacent parsonage. Pastor Mitchell, a kind-faced man in his 60s, answered in his dressing gown, surprise evident on his face. "Mrs. Montgomery, is everything all right?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "I need your counsel, Pastor, and your discretion." Within minutes, she was seated in the pastor's study, a cup of tea warming her hands as she explained her predicament. The older man listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When she finished, including Cole's proposal, he leaned back in his chair, stroking his silver beard thoughtfully. "The court's ruling troubles me deeply, Eleanor. Forcing a woman into marriage, even one who requires male guardianship according to the law, seems contrary to God's design for marriage as a willing covenant." Eleanor took hope from his words. "Then you believe I have the right to refuse?" Pastor Mitchell sighed heavily. "Morally, yes. Legally, I'm afraid the court's authority is binding unless challenged by another court or circumvented by a prior claim." He studied her intently. "This Mr. Reeves, you barely know him. Are you certain his offer is sincere? That he isn't simply using your vulnerability to his own advantage? Eleanor considered the question seriously. I believe he has his own reasons for opposing Blackwood. But yes, I think his offer is genuine. He's proposed an arrangement that would free me from Blackwood, but impose no permanent obligations to himself. The pastor nodded slowly. A marriage of convenience, then. Not ideal, but perhaps preferable to forced union with a man known for his cruelty. And an annulment afterward? Eleanor nodded. If I wish it, yes. Pastor Mitchell rose, moving to the window where the first true rays of sunlight were beginning to stream through. I cannot in good conscience perform a ceremony where the parties enter with the explicit intention of later dissolution, he said, and Eleanor's heart sank. But he turned back to her with unexpected resolve in his eyes. However, I also cannot in good conscience stand by while you're forced into marriage with Blackwood. The law of man sometimes contradicts the higher law we are called to uphold. He returned to his desk, pulling out a sheet of paper and dipping his pen in ink. I have a colleague in Fairfield, 2 days' ride from here, Pastor James Thornton. He's less traditional in his views than I am. This letter will explain your situation and ask for his assistance. He began to write, his pen scratching across the paper in the quiet morning light. If you choose this path, Eleanor, go with God's blessing, but go quickly. Blackwood won't wait long to make his move. When Eleanor arrived at the Mercantile an hour later, she found Cole already inside, having let himself in with the spare key she'd given him the previous day. He was examining the back door's lock and hinges. These need reinforcing, he said without preamble. Too easy to break in. Eleanor set down her shawl, watching him work for a moment before speaking. I've been to see Pastor Mitchell. Cole straightened, giving her his full attention. And? Eleanor removed the sealed letter from her pocket. He can't marry us himself, but he's given me a letter for a pastor in Fairfield who might be willing to help. It's 2 days' ride. Cole's expression remained carefully neutral. You've decided, then? Eleanor squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. Yes, I won't be Blackwood's prisoner. If marriage to you is my escape, then so be it. Before Cole could respond, the front bell jangled. Both turned to see Martha rushing in, her normally tidy appearance disheveled, her eyes wide with alarm. Ellie, oh, thank goodness you're both here. Blackwood's men. They're asking all over town about Mr. Reeves. They're saying he's wanted for murder in Wyoming, that there's a bounty on his head. Eleanor's gaze snapped to Cole, who cursed under his breath. It's a lie, he said flatly, but a convenient one. If they can paint me as a wanted man, they can kill me without consequences. Martha looked between them, confusion and fear evident on her face. What's going on? Ellie, please tell me you're not mixed up in something dangerous. Eleanor moved to her friend's side, taking her hands. Martha, I need you to listen carefully. I'm leaving Willow Creek today. I can't marry Blackwood, and staying means either surrendering to him or risking violence. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Leaving? But where will you go? What about the store? Eleanor squeezed her hands reassuringly. I'm entrusting the Mercantile to you. There's a bill of sale in my desk drawer, already signed. Once I'm gone, file it with the county clerk. The store will legally be yours, beyond Blackwood's reach. Martha shook her head in disbelief. But why would you? Eleanor cut her off gently. Because you're the only one I trust to keep it running the way it should be. Because you've been more than an employee. You've been a sister to me. And because I'd rather give my business to someone who cares about it than see it destroyed by Blackwood out of spite. Martha embraced her tightly, tears flowing freely now. "I'll take care of it, Ellie, I promise. But please, be careful." As Martha left to open the store for its regular hours, maintaining appearances while Eleanor and Cole prepared for departure, Eleanor turned back to the matter at hand. "We need to leave before Blackwood's men find you. If they've already started spreading lies about you being wanted." Cole was already moving toward the storeroom. "We'll need supplies. 2 days to Fairfield, then perhaps on to Denver afterward. Once we're married, Blackwood's legal claim evaporates, but his thirst for revenge won't." He began efficiently gathering essentials: jerky, coffee, ammunition. Eleanor followed, grabbing a canvas bag to fill with her own necessities. "I have savings," she said. "Not a fortune, but enough to get us established somewhere new if necessary." Cole paused, looking at her with an unreadable expression. "You're really willing to leave everything behind? Your home, your business, the life you've built here?" Eleanor's hands stilled on the bag she was filling. "5 years ago, I came to Willow Creek as a new bride, knowing no one. I built a life here once. I can do it again somewhere else." Her voice strengthened with resolve. "What I won't do is surrender my freedom to a man who sees me as property to be acquired. If that means starting over, then so be it." A hint of admiration flickered in Cole's eyes. "You're a remarkable woman, Eleanor Montgomery." The compliment caught her off guard, warming her, despite the tense circumstances. For a brief moment, their eyes held, and Eleanor felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. Then Cole returned to his task, all business again. "We'll leave at noon, less suspicious than sneaking out before dawn, and the stage from Denver arrives then. People will be distracted." The morning passed in a blur of discreet preparations. Eleanor gathered only what she could carry in saddlebags, including her most valuable possessions: her mother's locket, Thomas's pocket watch, the deed to her home, which she intended to transfer to Martha as well, and her savings sewn into the lining of a shawl. Cole secured horses from the livery stable, telling the stable master they were needed for deliveries to outlying farms. Just before noon, Eleanor stood in her small bedroom for the last time, taking a final look at the life she was leaving behind. The quilt she'd sewn during long winter evenings, the small desk where she wrote letters and kept the mercantile's books, the pressed flower from her wedding day framed on the wall, all remnants of a life that was ending. With a deep breath, she turned away, her resolve hardening. The past was gone, only the future remained. As the clock struck 12, the Denver stage rolled into Willow Creek, right on schedule, bringing with it the usual flurry of activity. Cole and Eleanor used the distraction to lead their horses down the alley behind the mercantile, where Martha waited to say a final goodbye. "I'll tell everyone you went to visit your cousin in Denver," Martha said, embracing Eleanor one last time. "It should buy you at least a day before Blackwood realizes you've truly fled." Eleanor blinked back tears. "Thank you for everything, Martha. I'll write when it's safe." She mounted her horse, adjusting her riding skirt as Cole checked their supplies one final time. Just as they were about to depart, a voice rang out from the end of the alley. "Going somewhere, Reeves?" 3 men stood blocking the exit, hands hovering near their holstered weapons. Blackwood's hired guns had found them. Cole moved his horse slightly forward, positioning himself between Eleanor and the men. "Just making deliveries, gentlemen. Nothing that concerns you." The leader of the trio, a lean man with a pockmarked face and cold eyes, stepped forward. "That's not how Mr. Blackwood sees it. Seems you've been making advances on his intended bride. He takes exception to that." His gaze shifted to Eleanor. "And you, Mrs. Montgomery. The boss says to remind you that running won't change the court's decision. Might be better for everyone if you just accept your situation. Eleanor's spine stiffened. Tell Mr. Blackwood I'd rather die than be his wife. The man's mouth twisted in an ugly smile. That can be arranged too, ma'am, though it'd be a waste. As for your gunslinger here, we've got authorization to bring him in dead or alive. Wanted man like him, nobody's going to ask too many questions. Cole's hand hadn't moved toward his weapon, but tension radiated from him like heat from a stove. You boys sure you want to do this? 3 against 1 might seem like good odds, but I guarantee at least one of you won't walk away. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but Eleanor could hear the steel beneath. The leader's eyes narrowed. Big talk from a man about to swing. He nodded to his companions, who spread out slightly, preparing to draw. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest as she realized they were about to witness a shootout or be caught in the middle of one. But before any guns could clear leather, a new voice cut through the tense standoff. That's quite enough! Sheriff Doyle appeared at the other end of the alley, his shotgun raised. Drop those gun belts, all of you, or I start shooting. The 3 men hesitated, clearly calculating their chances. This doesn't concern you, Sheriff, the leader called back. We're just apprehending a wanted man. Sheriff Doyle didn't lower his shotgun. Funny thing about that, I just got a telegram from the Territorial Marshal's office. No Cole Reeves on any wanted posters in Wyoming or anywhere else. Seems someone's been spreading false information. He moved closer, his expression grim. Now, I'll say it one more time. Drop those gun belts. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the men slowly complied, unbuckling their holsters and letting them fall to the dirt. Blackwood won't be happy about this, the leader spat. Doyle's expression didn't change. Mr. Blackwood doesn't run the law in Willow Creek, despite what he might think. Now you boys have a choice. Spend the night in my jail for attempted assault, or be on the next stage out of town. Either way, your employment here is terminated. Once Blackwood's men had been disarmed and escorted away, Sheriff Doyle turned to Eleanor and Cole. I can't detain them long without charges, and Blackwood will just hire more. Whatever you two are planning, you'd best do it now. Eleanor looked at him in surprise. You're helping us escape? The sheriff adjusted his hat, looking uncomfortable. Let's just say I don't hold with forcing a woman to marry against her will, court order or no. The law isn't always just, Mrs. Montgomery. Sometimes a person has to follow their conscience instead. He nodded toward the end of the alley, now clear. There's a trail through Miller's property that'll take you to the old mining road. Less chance of being spotted that way. Cole extended his hand to the sheriff. We won't forget this, Doyle. The lawman shook it briefly. Just don't make me regret it. And wherever you end up, treat her right. She deserves better than what this town's given her. As they rode away from Willow Creek, following the overgrown trail Sheriff Doyle had suggested, Eleanor felt a curious mixture of emotions. Fear of the unknown future that awaited her, grief for the life and friends she was leaving behind. But underneath it all, like a steady flame, burned something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The afternoon sun warmed her back as they rode side by side, putting distance between themselves and Blackwood's influence. Do you think he'll follow us? She asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Cole considered the question seriously. Not immediately. He'll try legal channels first, telegrams to neighboring towns, perhaps hire proper bounty hunters. Men like Blackwood hate to lose, but they hate to look desperate even more. He glanced at her, a hint of a smile softening his scarred features. Besides, once we reach Fairfield and see that pastor, his legal claim evaporates. Even Blackwood can't undo a valid marriage. Marriage. The word hung between them, significant and suddenly very real. Eleanor studied Cole's profile as they rode, trying to reconcile herself to the idea of this near stranger becoming her husband, even if only on paper. He must have felt her gaze, for he turned to meet it. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly. Eleanor shook her head. "No, but I am wondering what kind of man I'm binding myself to, however temporarily." Cole nodded, understanding her concern. "Fair enough. What do you want to know?" Eleanor considered her most pressing questions. "Your brother, was he your only family?" Cole's expression grew distant. "Parents died of fever when I was 16. Raised my brother Sam myself after that. He was 10 years younger than me, always looking for adventure. When he heard about the silver strike in Colorado, nothing could keep him away." As the afternoon wore on and they made camp for the night in a sheltered hollow, Cole continued to share pieces of his past in response to Eleanor's questions. He'd been a scout for the Army during the last years of the war, then a lawman in a Kansas cattle town until politics and a corrupt mayor had driven him out. He'd drifted after that, taking work where he could find it, some of it honest, some less so, by his own admission. "I've never killed a man who wasn't trying to kill me first," he told her as they sat beside their small campfire, the stars emerging overhead. "But I've got blood on my hands all the same." Eleanor watched the firelight play across his features, casting the scar on his cheek into sharp relief. "We all have regrets, Cole. Things we wish we'd done differently." He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing past her exterior to something deeper. "What are yours?" Eleanor wasn't accustomed to such direct questions about her inner life. Thomas had been a good man, but not one given to deep conversations. After a moment's consideration, she answered honestly. "I regret not questioning Thomas more about our finances. I knew something wasn't right. He was too nervous whenever the subject arose, but I told myself it was a wife's duty to trust her husband." She poked at the fire with a stick, watching the sparks rise. "I regret not fighting harder for my independence after he died, before Blackwood could sink his claws in." Cole listened attentively, without judgment. "And do you regret marrying Thomas?" The question caught her off guard. "No," she said, after a moment's reflection. "He was kind to me, in his way. It wasn't a grand passion, but there was affection between us. He never tried to break my spirit, just contain it within acceptable boundaries." As night deepened around them and they prepared to sleep, Cole insisting on taking the first watch, Eleanor found herself wondering about the strange twist of fate that had brought them to this moment. Tomorrow, they would reach Fairfield. Tomorrow, she would marry this complex, dangerous man with his scarred face and surprisingly gentle manner. Not for love or even affection, but for freedom. Yet as she drifted towards sleep, wrapped in her blanket on the hard ground, Eleanor realized that there were worse foundations for a marriage than mutual respect and a common enemy. Perhaps, in its own way, it was more honest than many unions blessed by church and society. With that thought providing unexpected comfort, she closed her eyes and surrendered to sleep. The sound of Cole quietly cleaning his colt, a strangely reassuring lullaby. The following day dawned clear and mild, a perfect late September morning in the Colorado mountains. They broke camp early, eager to reach Fairfield by afternoon. As they rode, Eleanor found herself studying Cole when he wasn't looking. The confident way he sat his horse, the watchful alertness that never seemed to leave him, the occasional half-smile that softened his hard features when something amused him. He was not handsome in the conventional sense, too weather-beaten and scarred for that. but there was something compelling about him all the same. A steadiness, a certainty of purpose that Thomas, for all his good qualities, had lacked. Eleanor caught herself wondering what it might be like to be truly married to such a man, then quickly pushed the thought away. Their arrangement was one of convenience, nothing more. Romance had no place in it. They reached Fairfield just as the church bells were ringing 3 o'clock. It was a larger settlement than Willow Creek, boasting a proper hotel, 2 saloons, and a bustling main street lined with businesses. Cole led them directly to the white-steepled church at the far end of town, where they tethered their horses and approached the adjacent parsonage. Pastor Thornton, a surprisingly young man with spectacles and an open, friendly face, welcomed them into his study after reading Pastor Mitchell's letter. "I must say, this is an unusual situation," he remarked, studying them both with keen interest. "But Mitchell vouches for your character, Mrs. Montgomery, and the circumstances he describes are indeed troubling. Marriage should never be coerced." Eleanor felt a surge of relief at his words. "Then you'll help us, Pastor?" Thornton removed his spectacles, polishing them thoughtfully with a handkerchief. "Before I agree, I must ask, are you entering this union of your own free will, Mrs. Montgomery? Not under duress from Mr. Reeves or any other party?" Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "Absolutely. This marriage is my choice, the only choice available to me if I wish to escape a forced union with William Blackwood." The pastor nodded, then turned to Cole. "And you, sir? What are your intentions toward this lady?" Cole's expression remained serious. "To protect her from Blackwood and honor whatever arrangement she wishes after that's accomplished. If she wants an annulment later, I won't contest it." Thornton replaced his spectacles, regarding them both with a mixture of concern and compassion. "A marriage entered with dissolution already in mind troubles me deeply. However, so does the alternative you face, Mrs. Montgomery." For a tense moment, Eleanor feared he would refuse them. But then the young pastor sighed, rising from behind his desk. "I believe in marriage as a sacred covenant, but I also believe in freedom and consent as fundamental to that covenant. If performing this ceremony prevents a greater violation of those principles, then so be it." He moved to a small bookshelf, retrieving his Bible and a ledger. "I'll need witnesses, of course. My housekeeper and the church deacon should suffice, and you'll need a marriage license from the county clerk." He glanced at the clock on his wall. "The office closes at 4. If you hurry, you can obtain the license and return for the ceremony before sunset." Eleanor felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Thank you, Pastor. You can't know what this means to me." An hour later, license in hand, Eleanor stood in the small Fairfield church beside Cole Reeves as Pastor Thornton prepared to join them in matrimony. The housekeeper, Mrs. Benson, had provided Eleanor with a small bouquet of late-blooming asters from the garden, and even insisted on brushing out her hair, which now fell in loose waves around her shoulders, instead of its usual practical bun. The church deacon, Mr. Perkins, and Mrs. Benson stood as witnesses, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern at this hastily arranged ceremony between obvious strangers. As Pastor Thornton opened his Bible and began the familiar words of the marriage service, Eleanor felt a sudden tremor of uncertainty. Was she truly prepared to bind herself to this man, however temporarily? As if sensing her unease, Cole's hand found hers, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers with gentle pressure. She looked up to find his eyes on her, steady and reassuring. In that moment, Eleanor knew she was making the right choice. "Do you, Eleanor Montgomery, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part." Pastor Thornton's voice brought Eleanor back to the present moment. The traditional vows, spoken at countless weddings across the country, suddenly seemed fraught with irony given their circumstances. Yet as she looked into Cole's eyes, she found she could answer honestly, "I do." The pastor turned to Cole. "And do you, Cole Reeves, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Cole's deep voice was unwavering as he responded, "I do." The simplicity and certainty of his answer sent an unexpected shiver down Eleanor's spine. "The rings, please," Pastor Thornton prompted, and for the first time, uncertainty flashed across Cole's features. They had not discussed rings, had not thought to purchase any in their haste to reach Fairfield. But before either could speak, Mrs. Benson stepped forward, removing a simple gold band from her own finger. "My Harold's been gone these 5 years," she said with a kind smile. "He'd be pleased to know his ring helped a young couple in need." Eleanor was touched by the gesture, but hesitated to accept such a personal item. "Mrs. Benson, we couldn't possibly." The older woman pressed the ring into Cole's palm, closing his fingers over it. "Nonsense. It's just gathering dust on these old bones. Take it, with my blessing." Cole nodded his thanks, then turned to Eleanor with an apologetic look. "I have nothing to give you in return," he said quietly. Eleanor thought for a moment, then reached up to unclasp the simple gold chain around her neck, her mother's cross, one of the few possessions she'd brought from her life before Willow Creek. "Use this," she said, placing it in his hand. With these makeshift symbols of their union, they completed the ceremony. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Pastor Thornton declared, closing his Bible. "You may kiss your bride." Another moment they hadn't prepared for. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks as Cole hesitated, clearly unsure of how to proceed with this traditional conclusion to the ceremony. Then, with a gentleness that belied his rough exterior, he leaned down and brushed his lips against hers in the briefest of kisses, barely more than a whisper of contact, yet somehow more intimate than Eleanor had expected. As they parted, a curious warmth spread through her, leaving her momentarily disoriented. Mrs. Benson beamed at them as if they were truly newlyweds in love, while Mr. Perkins offered gruff congratulations. Pastor Thornton completed the marriage certificate with flourishing penmanship, then handed it to Eleanor with a serious expression. "Guard this well, Mrs. Reeves. It's your protection against Mr. Blackwood's claims, Mrs. Reeves." The new name struck Eleanor with unexpected force as she carefully folded the certificate and tucked it into her bodice for safekeeping. She was no longer Eleanor Montgomery, widow of Thomas Montgomery. She was now Eleanor Reeves, wife of Cole Reeves, gunslinger, drifter, and the most unlikely of saviors. As they thanked the pastor and his companions for their kindness and prepared to depart, Mrs. Benson insisted they take a basket of food she'd hastily assembled. "Every wedding needs a feast, even a small one," she declared, pressing it into Eleanor's hands. Outside the church, the setting sun bathed Fairfield in golden light as Cole helped Eleanor mount her horse. "Where to now, wife?" he asked, the words sounding strange on his lips. Eleanor considered their options. "Denver, I think. Large enough to disappear in, with opportunities for both of us to find work." Cole nodded in agreement. "Denver it is." As they rode out of Fairfield, married in name if not in truth, Eleanor felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since the judge's gavel had fallen, sealing her fate to Blackwood, she could breathe freely. Whatever uncertainties lay ahead, whatever complications their unusual arrangement might bring, she was no longer facing them alone. She glanced at Cole, riding beside her, this dangerous stranger who was now her husband, and found him watching her with an unreadable expression. "Having regrets already?" she asked, only half joking. Cole shook his head, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "No, ma'am. Just thinking that Blackwood didn't know what he was up against when he tried to cage you." The compliment warmed her unexpectedly. "We make a formidable team, it seems, Mr. Reeves." His smile deepened, reaching his eyes. "That we do, Mrs. Reeves. That we do." They made camp that night in a sheltered grove of aspens, their golden leaves rustling gently in the evening breeze. As they shared the wedding feast Mrs. Benson had prepared, fresh bread, cheese, dried apples, and even a small jar of honey, Eleanor found herself studying the plain gold band now encircling her finger. "We should discuss what happens next," she said finally, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Cole looked up from the fire he was tending. "You mean after we reach Denver?" Eleanor nodded. "We're legally married now, but as you said, it's an arrangement of convenience. We should establish some guidelines." Cole set aside the stick he'd been using to stir the embers and gave her his full attention. "What did you have in mind?" Eleanor had given the matter considerable thought as they rode from Fairfield. "We'll need to maintain the appearance of a genuine marriage, at least until we're certain Blackwood has given up his pursuit. That means sharing accommodations, being seen together in public." She hesitated, then continued with determination. "But I propose separate sleeping arrangements and a clear understanding that either of us is free to dissolve this union once it's safe to do so." She watched his face carefully, searching for any sign of disagreement or disappointment. Cole simply nodded. "Seems fair and practical." Relief washed over Eleanor. He understood and respected the boundaries she needed. "There's one more thing," she added. "If we're to convince others our marriage is real, we should at least attempt to know one another better, to be friends, if not truly husband and wife." A peculiar expression crossed Cole's face at her words, something almost vulnerable beneath his usual guardedness. "Friends," he repeated softly. "Can't say I've had many of those in recent years." The admission touched something in Eleanor. This hard man with his scarred face and deadly reputation had risked everything to help her escape Blackwood, asking nothing in return except the chance to see justice done. Perhaps there was more to Cole Reeves than she'd initially believed. "Well, you have one now," she said decisively. "Whether we remain married or part ways in the future, I count you as a friend, Cole Reeves." She extended her hand across the fire, offering it as one might in a business arrangement. Cole looked at it for a moment, then took it in his larger one. But instead of shaking it as she expected, he turned it over and pressed his lips briefly to her knuckles in an old-fashioned gesture that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "To friendship, then," he said, releasing her hand, "and to new beginnings." The next morning dawned clear and cold, with frost silvering the aspen leaves around their camp. As Eleanor folded her blanket, she caught Cole watching her with an intensity that made her pause. "What is it?" she asked. He seemed to consider his words carefully before responding. "Just thinking that for a woman who's been through what you have, losing your husband, fighting Blackwood, leaving everything behind, you show remarkable strength." Eleanor was unused to such direct praise, especially from a man. Thomas had been kind, but sparing with compliments. "Necessity breeds resilience, I suppose," she replied. busying herself with securing her saddlebags to hide the flush of pleasure his words had brought. Cole shook his head. Not always. I've seen plenty of people break under less pressure than you faced. He finished saddling his horse, then added quietly, Blackwood was a fool to think he could ever truly own you. As they rode toward Denver, the golden aspens giving way to pine forests as they descended from the mountains, Eleanor found herself increasingly curious about the man who was now her husband in name. The initial desperation that had driven their alliance was fading, replaced by a genuine desire to understand him. Tell me about the scar, she ventured during a brief rest to water their horses at a clear mountain stream. Cole's hand rose unconsciously to the long mark that ran from temple to jaw on his left side. Apache raid, when I was scouting for the army. Got separated from my unit and cornered by 3 warriors. Killed 2, but the 3rd got close enough with his knife before I shot him. He recounted the story matter-of-factly, without bravado. I was lucky. Most men who face Apache warriors alone don't live to tell the tale. You've lived quite a life, Eleanor observed, trying to reconcile the dangerous past he described with the considerate man who rode beside her. Cole's expression turned reflective. Not always one to be proud of. When you live by the gun long enough, it changes you, makes you hard in ways that aren't always good. He looked at her then, his eyes betraying a vulnerability his words didn't express. That's part of why I wanted to help you. Chance to use whatever skills I have for something worthwhile for once. Eleanor was touched by his honesty. Well, I'm grateful, whatever your reasons. She remounted her horse, adjusting her riding skirt. And for what it's worth, I don't think you're as hard as you believe yourself to be. A truly hard man wouldn't have offered marriage to free a woman he barely knew. They reached Denver as the sun was setting. The city spread before them in the valley, lights beginning to twinkle in windows and along the streets. After securing rooms at a modest hotel, a single room with 2 beds to maintain their cover as newlyweds, they ventured out to find a proper meal, their first in a restaurant since leaving Willow Creek. As they walked the bustling streets, Cole offered his arm, and Eleanor took it without hesitation. The simple contact felt strangely natural, as if they truly were a married couple out for an evening stroll rather than fugitives playing parts in an elaborate charade. At a small cafe near the hotel, they enjoyed a hearty meal of beef stew and fresh bread, making plans for the days ahead. I'll look for work tomorrow, Cole said, sopping up gravy with a chunk of bread. Plenty of businesses need security in a growing city like this. Eleanor nodded, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. And I'll inquire about positions at the mercantiles here. With my experience, I should find something suitable. She hesitated, then added, we should consider our story carefully. Newlyweds from Willow Creek, seeking opportunities in the city? Cole considered this. Simple, close to the truth, easier to maintain that way. Though we should probably avoid mentioning Blackwood unless necessary. Eleanor agreed. As they walked back to their hotel through the cool evening air, she found herself leaning slightly into Cole's solid presence beside her. There was comfort in his nearness, a sense of security she hadn't expected to feel so quickly with a man who had been a stranger mere days ago. When his arms slipped naturally around her waist as they navigated a crowded street corner, she didn't pull away. Their first week in Denver passed in a whirlwind of activity. Cole found work as a security guard at a local bank, his reputation with a gun an asset rather than a liability in this position. Eleanor secured employment at Harriman's Dry Goods, the largest mercantile in the city, where her experience and knowledge of inventory systems impressed the owner. They settled into a routine that felt surprisingly domestic. Breakfast together at the hotel, parting for their respective jobs, meeting again for dinner to share the events of their day. They were careful to present themselves as a happily married couple in public, Cole's hand often finding the small of Eleanor's back as they walked, Eleanor addressing him with a casual affection that became less forced with each passing day. If they sometimes caught themselves forgetting the pretense, neither mentioned it. 2 weeks after their arrival in Denver, Eleanor was arranging a display of imported fabrics when she looked up to find William Blackwood standing in the doorway of Harriman's, his fleshy face flushed with what might have been the exertion of climbing the steps or the triumph of having found her at last. Her blood ran cold at the sight of him, but she maintained her composure, setting down the bolt of silk she'd been holding with deliberate care. "Mr. Blackwood," she said coolly, "you're a long way from Willow Creek." Blackwood approached, his expensive boots clicking on the wooden floor. "Did you really think I wouldn't find you, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice low and menacing despite the smile fixed on his face. "Denver isn't so large that a woman of your distinctive appearance could disappear completely." Eleanor stood her ground, grateful that several customers browsed nearby. "I'm afraid you've wasted your journey, Mr. Blackwood. I'm no longer available for your court-mandated wedding." Blackwood's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "So I've heard. Married to that gun-slinging drifter, according to the gossip. A hasty ceremony in Fairfield, witnessed by a pastor's housekeeper and a doddering old deacon." He leaned closer, lowering his voice further. "A transparent ploy, my dear, and one easily challenged in court. A marriage clearly entered into solely to circumvent a legal judgment can be annulled just as easily as it was performed." Eleanor's heart pounded, but she kept her expression neutral. "Our marriage is legal and binding, Mr. Blackwood, and entered into with full consent on both sides, which is more than could be said for what you had planned." She glanced meaningfully toward the other customers, a reminder that they were in a public place. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to attend to." Blackwood caught her arm as she attempted to move past him, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "This isn't over, Eleanor," he hissed, all pretense of civility gone. "No man takes what's mine without consequences." "Your husband will learn that lesson soon enough." Eleanor wrenched her arm free, anger replacing fear. "I was never yours to take, William, and Cole is not a man you want to threaten." As if summoned by her words, the door to Harriman's opened again, and Cole himself entered, his eyes immediately finding Eleanor and narrowing at the sight of Blackwood beside her. He crossed the store in long strides, positioning himself at Eleanor's side, his hand coming to rest protectively at her waist. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his voice deceptively mild, though Eleanor could feel the tension radiating from him. Blackwood surveyed Cole with undisguised contempt, though Eleanor didn't miss the way he took a small step backward. "Mr. Reeves, I was just explaining to Eleanor that your little charade won't stand up to legal scrutiny. The court in Willow Creek granted me rights that a hastily arranged marriage of convenience can't invalidate." Cole's expression remained impassive, but his voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "Our marriage is legal and genuine, Blackwood. But even if it weren't, Eleanor is under my protection now. I suggest you remember what happened to men who crossed me in Silverton." The veiled reference to his brother's death and Cole's subsequent vengeance wasn't lost on Blackwood, whose florid complexion paled slightly. "Are you threatening me, Reeves?" Cole smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Just stating facts. Eleanor has made her choice. Accept it and return to Willow Creek, or face the consequences." For a tense moment, the three stood locked in silent confrontation, the other customers in the store watching with undisguised interest. Then, Mr. Harriman himself emerged from the back room, his bushy eyebrows rising at the scene before him. "Is there a problem here, Mrs. Reeves?" he asked, coming to stand beside Eleanor. The use of her married name seemed to strike Blackwood like a physical blow. Eleanor seized the opportunity. "No problem, Mr. Harriman. This gentleman was just leaving." Blackwood looked from Eleanor to Cole, then to the store owner, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he donned his hat with a sharp movement. "This isn't finished," he muttered, then turned on his heel and strode from the store, the bell jangling violently in his wake. When Blackwood had gone, Eleanor released a shaky breath, suddenly aware that Cole's arm had tightened around her waist. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Eleanor nodded, though in truth she felt rattled by the encounter. "He found us sooner than I expected." Cole's expression was grim. "He's determined, I'll give him that. But so am I." He turned to Mr. Harriman, who was watching them curiously. "Sir, I apologize for the disturbance. That man has been harassing my wife since before our marriage." Harriman nodded understandingly. "No apology necessary, Mr. Reeves. Mrs. Reeves has already proven herself a valuable employee, and I won't have her bothered while under my roof." He patted Eleanor's arm paternally. "Take the rest of the day, my dear. Your husband can escort you home safely." Eleanor started to protest. She needed the wages, but the look in Cole's eyes convinced her it was wiser to accept the offer. "Thank you, Mr. Harriman. I'll make up the hours tomorrow." As they walked back to their hotel, Cole kept Eleanor close to his side, his vigilant gaze scanning the crowds for any sign of Blackwood or his men. "We should leave Denver," he said grimly. "If he found us once, he'll find us again." Eleanor shook her head. "No, I'm tired of running, Cole. We have jobs here, the beginning of a new life. I won't let Blackwood drive us away." They paused at a street corner, waiting for a wagon to pass. "Besides," she continued, "our marriage is legal. He can bluster about challenging it, but he has no grounds. We followed the proper procedures, obtained a license, had a legitimate ceremony performed by an ordained minister." Cole didn't look convinced. "Men like Blackwood don't always play by the rules, Eleanor. He could hire someone to eliminate the problem, meaning me, and then pursue you again as a widow." The blunt assessment sent a chill through Eleanor, not just at the danger to Cole, but at the realization of how much the thought of losing him distressed her. When had this arrangement, this marriage of convenience, begun to feel like something more? "Then we'll be careful," she insisted. "Take precautions, but I won't spend my life running from William Blackwood or any other man who thinks he can control me." She looked up at Cole, determination in her green eyes. "We stand our ground, together." Something shifted in Cole's expression as he gazed down at her, a softening, a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Together," he echoed, and the words seemed to carry a weight beyond their current circumstances. Eleanor's heart quickened at the intensity in his eyes, and for a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her, truly kiss her, not the brief token of their wedding ceremony. The spell was broken by a passing carriage, splashing through a puddle nearby, sending them both stepping back to avoid the spray. Cole cleared his throat, offering his arm again as they resumed their walk. "I'll speak with the bank manager tomorrow. Arrange to vary my hours so I can escort you to and from Harriman's each day." Eleanor took his arm, grateful for his practical approach, even as she wrestled with the unexpected emotions their moment of connection had stirred. "And I'll be vigilant at the store. Blackwood won't catch me off guard again." As they reached their hotel and climbed the stairs to their room, Eleanor found herself acutely aware of the domestic intimacy they shared, despite the boundaries they'd established. The sight of Cole's shirt hanging beside her dress, his razor on the washstand next to her hairbrush, small signs of a shared life that was becoming less of a charade with each passing day. That night, as Eleanor prepared for bed behind the privacy screen they'd arranged in their room, she found herself thinking of the look in Cole's eyes on the street corner. There had been protection there, yes, and concern, but something else too. Something that had made her breath catch and her pulse quicken. "Cole?" she called softly, emerging from behind the screen in her nightgown and robe. He looked up from where he sat, cleaning his Colt at the small table by the window, a nightly ritual she'd come to find oddly comforting. "Yes?" Eleanor hesitated, suddenly unsure of what she wanted to say. That she was grateful for his protection? That she was beginning to see him as more than a convenient solution to her Blackwood problem? That the thought of him facing danger on her behalf terrified her in ways she hadn't expected? "Thank you," she said finally, "for standing with me today." Cole set his cleaned revolver aside, his eyes never leaving hers. "No need for thanks. We're in this together now." Eleanor moved to sit across from him at the small table, her hands folded in her lap. "When I agreed to this arrangement, I saw it as simply a means to escape Blackwood. I never expected—" She trailed off, searching for the right words. Cole waited, giving her time. "I never expected to feel safe with you," she finished quietly. "Or to feel that perhaps this marriage of convenience might become something more genuine with time." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Cole reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. "Eleanor," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "when I offered this solution, I had no expectations beyond helping you escape Blackwood's clutches. But these past weeks," he paused, a man unused to expressing such feelings, "these past weeks have shown me what a true partnership might be like. Whatever comes next, whether we face down Blackwood together or eventually go our separate ways, know that meeting you has changed me for the better." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. She turned her hand beneath his, intertwining their fingers. "Then perhaps we should stop thinking of our marriage as temporary," she suggested softly. "Perhaps we should give ourselves permission to see where this path leads us." Cole's eyes, usually so guarded, were open and vulnerable as he nodded. "I'd like that," he said simply. And in that quiet hotel room, far from the life she'd left behind, Eleanor realized she'd found something she hadn't been looking for. Not just freedom from Blackwood, but the possibility of a future with a man who respected her strength, protected her freedom, and increasingly had claimed her heart. 3 months later, Eleanor sat on the porch of their small house on the outskirts of Denver, watching the winter sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The news had reached them the week before. William Blackwood, overextended in his business ventures and facing mounting legal troubles, had sold his holdings in Willow Creek and departed for San Francisco. The threat he had posed was finally, truly over. Cole emerged from the house behind her, draping a warm shawl over her shoulders, before taking the seat beside her. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Reeves?" he asked, the scar on his cheek crinkling as he smiled. Eleanor returned his smile, taking his hand in hers. "Just thinking about choices," she said. "The court gave me a husband I never wanted, but in defying them, I found the man I needed." Cole squeezed her hand gently. "And I found a woman strong enough to choose her own path," even when the whole world told her she couldn't. As the last light faded from the western sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had begun as unlikely allies and discovered, in the process of securing Eleanor's freedom, that they had found something far more precious: a love built on respect, courage, and the choice to forge their own destiny together. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.